There is a reason some leaders exert control with just a few sentences, where others give a whole speech and no one takes the right actions. The best execs use these 3 hidden principles anyone can learn to get their employees and partners to do exactly what they want. These are the same principles I use as a mentalist for elite audiences, to get people to do things they would have never agreed to, and they thank me for it later. My name is Derek Salinger, and I help leaders win in the boardroom, from stage, and in meetings. Now, when I say control someone's actions, I'm not talking about force. If someone sticks a gun in your face and says, "Give me your wallet," well, that's an effective action control for a moment, but it isn't a skill, it's power. A lot of leaders try to do the same thing, they're just wearing a suit. Pressure, position, urgency. People comply, but the second you turn your back, they resist, they stall, and they do the bare minimum. What I'm talking about is better. Influence so clean that people move, and later they're glad that they did. That's not compliance, it's commitment. Because if you have to scare adults into doing their jobs, you're not leading, you're a budget mafia boss with a LinkedIn profile. Now, before I go further, you need to know the first thing that mentalists learn. Attention is unbelievably easy to direct. There's an old idea in magic that if you put a dancing girl on stage, you could sneak an elephant in behind her, because people see what their attention is pointed at and miss what they weren't prepared to notice. Now, that could be used badly, like manipulation, kind of like a bait and switched used car salesman. In the moment that people feel handled, trust is gone. They might comply for a second, but they won't follow you anywhere worth going. So when I say think like a mentalist, I don't mean deceive people. What I mean is that influence begins with attention. If you can't direct what people notice, what feels important right now, your message might be brilliant and you'll still lose the room. So the first principle is this: if you want to direct action, you have to direct attention. A mentalist knows that people don't act on all information. They act on what stands out, what connects, and keeps showing up with meaning. That's the game. You're not just presenting information, you're shaping the field, quietly narrowing down what feels like the real option. Not through deception, not by cornering people, but when you present information with precision, the most important thing is emphasized, repeated, and woven through the story. And then something shifts. The room starts moving in one direction, and the alternatives disappear without a fight. That's what great mentalists do, and that's what great leaders do. Some leaders think that influence comes from saying more context, more priorities, more moving parts. But that does the opposite. It widens the field when you need to narrow it. Action gets easier when people aren't juggling 10 competing ideas. Action gets easier when one idea keeps coming back with enough clarity and weight that everyone starts to feel, hey, yeah, that's it, obviously. And that's why repetition matters. It's a key to compelling storytelling, not empty repetition, not saying the same sentence louder like a man arguing with a printer. I mean deliberate repetition in the framing, the examples, the story, and bringing everyone back to the central idea until it becomes the obvious path forward. So if you want people to act, stop asking, how much do I need to say? Ask instead, what idea am I making impossible to miss? Because if your communication leaves 5 paths equally alive, people will hesitate. When one path is clear, meaningful, and reinforced, people move. What most leaders miss is that getting people to notice something is only half the battle, because attention alone doesn't create action. You could get everybody focused on exactly the right thing and still watch absolutely nothing happen. Why? Because people don't respond to what you said. They respond to what they think it means. And that's the second principle. If you want to direct action, you have to frame the meaning. This is where leaders lose people. They think, I said it clearly. And maybe, but clarity of language doesn't mean clarity of meaning. If your team hears a change in direction and interprets it as instability, they won't move. If they hear urgency and interpret it as panic, they'll move badly. And if they hear high standards, but interpret it as I'm about to be blamed for something, they'll protect themselves, not the mission. So the question isn't just did they hear me, it's what meaning did they attach to it? And meaning doesn't happen automatically. It has to be framed. That's why story matters. Story tells the room what kind of moment this is, without turning your message into a corporate hostage video. It gives context, stakes, and a role. Here's what matters, and here's where we're going. And that's what mentalists understand. People are always assigning significance. If you don't shape it, they'll fill in the blanks with maybe fear or politics or some private nonsense. If you want people to act, you don't ask, did they hear me? You ask, what meaning did I make unavoidable? Attention gets you in the door. Meaning tells people what room they're in. And even then, someone could understand exactly what you mean and still not move. Brings us to the third principle, the one that many leaders ignore without even realizing it. Even when leaders get attention and meaning right, they miss the thing that makes people move. In my TEDx talk, I ask people to call out numbers inside of a range for a piece of stage mentalism. It's kind of a strange thing to do. Now, I'm not forcing them and I'm not threatening them, but I'm delivering the frame with certainty. So the next thing they do feels obvious, giving me the number.
I'm going to have you name only between 1 and 26. What number would you like? Number 25, add that right here, big and bold.
And that's what leadership is. People are always scanning you for one question. Is this direction settled? If the way you speak answers that with hesitation, people stall. Not because they're lazy, but because your uncertainty becomes theirs. So here's the third principle. If you want to direct action, you have to transmit certainty. Leaders often over-explain, they overqualify, they soften, they keep adding sentences to make the room and themselves feel safe. But they're not just listening to your logic, they're reading your state. Do you believe this? Are you settled? Or are you trying to convince yourself while we watch? And the fastest way to signal you're not settled is over-talking. You think you're adding clarity, but what you're actually adding is doubt. Certainty isn't aggression, and it isn't some chest-thumping lunatic, it's solidity. Sounding like you've made the call, because attention gets them looking, meaning gets them understanding, but certainty is what gets them going. So if you want people to act when you speak, stop thinking like a manager pushing information and start thinking like a mentalist and leader directing experience. Here's the sequence. Direct attention, get the room looking at what matters, frame the meaning, define what this moment is and why it matters, and then transmit certainty. Make the direction feel settled enough to move. But there's one habit that wrecks all three, and most leaders don't see it. They keep talking. And the more you talk, the more you muddy the meaning and show uncertainty. So watch this next video on why talking too much makes you look weak. Because if you don't fix that, you can know all of this and still lose the room.